Hello and welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor podcast. I am your host, Andy, and with me for this special summer series on heroes versus villains is Emma. I
Hi.
practiced that. Emma.
Good. I mean, for the video, we've got it on the little thing anyway, so it's all good.
Emma,
My
I think the
identity has
whole
been
crowd
revealed.
wants to know, since we're going to do this, what's it like to be a hero?
Um, I imagine amazing. But I feel like you'd have to ask Rupert. Isn't he the only one who truly knows?
Well, I was just thinking, like, clearly I'm the villain, so you must be the hero.
I mean, to the Tumblr crowd, probably just by virtue of being, a girl and funny, then hilarious,
Well, maybe
obviously.
what it is that all us Purple Rock folks are the villains, and I'm sure you'd be able to find, a site or two or somebody that might agree with that, or maybe four of us, and then there's that guy we let talk that one time.
The
Maybe
thing
he
is,
gets to be on the heroes tribe.
Thing is,
But
yeah, he's so clearly like the actual hero, but we managed to spin into being the villain.
that's right. We would corrupt him like poor Sandra, who was, totally a hero, and then cast wrong, and then suddenly she's ripping off tops. So yes, we're here to talk about the first three episodes of Heroes versus Villains. First, I thought we would just kind of lay the ground rules of what we're trying to accomplish here. First of all, we just wanted to watch something cool,
We
some
didn't want to
fun.
watch Gabon.
No,
We
we
did
totally
not.
tapped out on that one. It was like, what, you boys, yeah, have some fun.
We
And that,
didn't even we didn't even watch along with them. We were very unsupportive.
no, I was like, I'll remember it. Like, I've seen it. That's enough for me.
I
And
read the
frankly,
recaps.
yeah, we commented, and frankly, I might have watched it, but there was no easy way to do so, and I wasn't going to go out of my way to accomplish something that wasn't going to be that much fun.
You
But we
weren't
thought,
you weren't going to go to purplerockpodcast.com/Amazon and purchase Gabon.
no, because I would have to pay like duty charges to do
Yeah,
that. See,
not worth it.
because it's a reminder for everyone. If the accent and general pallor of this face isn't giving it away, I am not from America. Um,
Sorry, are you trying to blame your paleness on being Canadian while talking to a very pale coastal Californian?
Yeah, it's
Southern
great that I'm
Californians
not the most
now.
pale person in this conversation. And I wonder if that would be true for like two-thirds of the Purple Rock podcast. We are not a podcast full of, color other than purple. Um, so yeah, we wanted to watch something fun, something good, and a nice palate cleanser for the people that actually did watch along. And we batted around a few ideas, and we're just like, screw it, let's just go with the best. And that's what I think of Heroes versus Villains. I'm going into this having seen it aired when it aired, and then watched it. I rewatched a bit of it last summer during our 30 for 30 season
Right.
series.
Hmm.
But other than that, that's it. And I have it ranked as the best season of all time, and I'm not really going into this to challenge that idea. How about you? Where do you fit in? How do you feel? What's your thoughts of Heroes versus Villains before rewatching it?
I mean, when we did the whole, like a couple of years ago, God, was that really multiple
Yep,
years ago?
we've known each other so long.
Uh, did this series, about ranking the seasons and all that, and you had people on. I was, I believe, the first person you had on, which meant I was the one who got to talk about heroes versus villains because I, like any good God fearing Survivor fan, ranked it as number one.
Yeah, and so yeah, this isn't us trying to get into contrarians like, oh, it's not really that good. Only the true Survivor heads know how to appreciate a great season, like blah, and that's when the snob says something awful that I can't even bring myself to say. No, we just want to have fun and talk about a great season of Survivor. And as we say, this is a rewatch for us. We've seen it and we remember it. I toyed with the idea of trying to not talk about future events in the podcast, or at least save them to the end. And as I was putting together the discussion for tonight, I realized that's impossible. The fun and joy of a rewatch is to talk about the things you notice now that you didn't notice the first time because they weren't significant until all of the events unfold, and you're like, they're setting this story up or that story up. So on the off chance that you're somebody who watches, Survivor and listens to podcasts and watches video podcasts, but hasn't seen the biggest season in the history of the show and is unspoiled, maybe just turn off the podcast now, and come back. Come back at the end, because we're just going to spoil it all. We will be focused on the events of the first 3 episodes, but if things happen this episode that set up things down the road, we're going to talk about that. So I think with that out of the way, a good way to start this discussion is to talk about the theme. And they didn't want to call it just All Stars 2 or something, generic that means nothing, like, I don't know, Game Changers or something. They call it Heroes versus Villains, and I think that had some implications. What are your thoughts on calling the season Heroes versus Villains?
Well, it certainly affected the score. Like, just from them entering was so funny to me. You hear this like grand music with the heroes coming on their helicopter, and they get there first. And so Jeff sort of chatting them up, and then it's like practically the Imperial March, it's just like, dun, 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 and like they come down and sand is blowing everywhere, and then
it's the best, and I hope that they planned it that the first thing that happens is the villains lead in the. Oh no, I've lost sound here. Am I gone?
Oh, you're back.
There we go. But that's something I really picked up on now. Like, those darn villains.
And it's like, I mean, because they told the helicopter pilots, no, wait. We're gonna be, make a fashionably late entrance and just spray sand everywhere.
Yeah, and the scoring throughout the season, they're just having so much fun with that. The villains get the dark music, and the heroes, all uplift. And it's kind of funny because I think the best thing that came out of Heroes versus Villains is the heroes end up not being all that heroic, and the villains being much more enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think like that is like the irony or like a internet fan like, oh, that's what you get, probes, for trying to push these heroes down my throat. I actually think it's just funny. I like it. I like that like we get to see what happens when heroes don't have any villains to blame.
Right. And they maybe start turning other people on their own tribe, become the villains, people who are very likable the first time around.
Yeah, it's like the Harvey Dent line in The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Mm-hmm. And that seems to happen a lot in Survivor if you keep coming back. Unless maybe sometimes if you start as a villain, you get to become the hero later. But otherwise, by that 4th or 5th time, people are like, yes. Although, I mean, obviously, there's plenty of people who, tired of him long before he stopped coming back.
But tired of seen as villainous, I feel like, are different.
Mm-hmm. But I think the other thing that people have is like, obviously, like the concept of heroes and villains in this game is, of course, silly. But at the same time, I actually have very little problem with the way they did it because the heroes are, the casual fan. These are the people they root for, and that's that tribe. And then the villains are the people who often were the antagonists towards those people. Yeah. But I do think that there were a few misfits here or there. Who do you think was the biggest misalignment? I'm not saying miscast, but who is on the wrong tribe?
Well, one thing I'd like to say first, one thing I noticed is when Jeff, asked at the beginning, like, oh, who thinks they're on the wrong tribe? And on the villains, 3.5 people raised their hands. I'm forgetting who now, but someone sort of like later is like, oh, maybe me, sort of like, I want to join it. But it's 3.5 out of 10. And Jeff's like, almost all the villains think they're on the wrong tribe. And I'm like,
yeah, that's kind of like when he did the whole who thought I pressured Janu into quitting, and then Kobe is like, it's like, see, no one
did, it's fine.
The classic
it's the Tyler Perry I'd have Spencer had it. Yep, that's right, I knew it. You guys are just results oriented.
Yeah, no, the classic Probst of not remembering that you don't ask questions you don't already know the answer to. It's like, I'm going to make a point here, and I don't care what you say. I'm still making that point.
But
For me,
anyway, to answer your
yeah,
actual
go ahead.
question, so people didn't fit. Well, one, I should note that, like you, I first watched this live because, like you, I've watched the whole thing since the beginning.
High five.
We're the only ones of the Purple Rock crew who were like that. But yeah, and I was someone who, like, I wasn't like a nerd about it yet. Like, I was a nerd about it. I loved the show and stuff, but just didn't even know what was going on the internet and stuff.
Yeah.
And no, I'm still pretty young, but and there was, I only didn't remember Candace and Danielle. Didn't remember them. Then, having since rewatched, and I know this is a very like common thing now people say on the internet, but I remember a couple years ago rewatching Cook Islands and being like, wait, why the fuck was Candace on the hero tribe? Like, she's not only like one of the white people, but she's like, she's the mutineer. She's against and it's just like, it just made, like, the fact that they brought her back was already suspect, but like completely wrong tribe. And she
Yeah.
even proves it in the season.
Yeah, for me, it's Candace. When it happened, when they first announced the cast, because they're so famous. Like, these are the big stars.
Mm-hmm.
Plus Danielle and Candace. So those were the ones that I kind of like. I was pretty sure I knew who Candace was. Danielle, I had to look up a bit. I didn't have a problem with Candace being cast because she was a big factor in Cook Islands. And
Right.
if she had just come back in Micronesia, nobody would question it. And of course, now we know that she was cast to come back for Micronesia and then dropped out. And that's how we got Parvati. So I didn't have necessarily a problem with her being like one of the 10 women. But as a hero, yeah, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, you painted her as a villain in her season.
And to be perfectly honest, I have no idea why I don't remember her. Like, I really liked Cook Islands from the beginning.
It had been a while, I think.
It had been a while. I was like, I don't know, it just didn't remember her. And then of the villains, like, Danielle's easily the most forgettable, but it's like one where it's like, whatever. Like, if you were going to choose, like, if you had to put her on one team, I think that's where you put her. You wouldn't have her be a hero.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
like,
she's just like neutral. She's nothing, right? Like, yeah, so I don't complain about her being a villain. We have another discussion about Danielle coming up. But yeah, Candace as a hero is just ridiculous. I think Sandra as a villain is a weird fit. She was the antagonist to one of the biggest Survivor villains in Johnny Fairplay. She was Rupert's running buddy, and he's a hero.
Yeah.
So
I think
like
it's
that,
basically like, oh, you're a woman and you have like attitude, so you're a villain, which is also the Courtney effect.
Yeah,
which, like,
but I mean, Courtney, I don't have a problem with it because
I'm fine with it. But
yeah, she paints herself as that like her shtick is that she's kind of bitchy and she doesn't like anybody. These people act like they're my friends, but really I just like them less or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know it. So yeah, that one I didn't have a problem with. But yeah, it was like you could just swap Candace and Sandra, it'd be fine. Now I think what happened is they wanted to balance out athleticism probably a bit. But yeah, that one I didn't have a problem with. It's interesting when we posted that we were going to talk about heroes versus villains, and people, jumped the gun and started commenting about it because we have the best commenting group in all of Survivor Internet land. People were like, "Oh, Coach is a villain. That's weird," and that just shocked me.
I shut that down. You process so fast because I hate Coach. Like, I'll say it. I've always said it. Like, I think this is probably, I said we'll have to discuss this later. I think this is probably my favorite season for Coach. We'll discuss that in a different episode. But Coach, and like, I know everyone's like, oh, Coach was annoying and self-specific. But you know what? Sure, maybe Coach was entertaining in Token Chains, but he was a sanctimonious asshole. He was a dick. He wasn't just annoying, he was a dick. And like, yeah, sure, Tyson was rude to like Sierra and stuff, and Tyson was rightly put on the villain's tribe.
Yeah.
But like, he has this whole thing about his playing with honor and integrity, and I've never lied, and blah, blah, blah. And he's saying all this to Sierra when she proved for a fact that he had lied. Like, it was evidence, not just like we see it, but like it was clear from what they were seeing. And so, no, sorry, you don't get to be a hero for that.
You know, like he's obviously a villain. That would, yeah, like people started talking about that. That blew my mind. It's like, yeah, he was set up as like the guy that was the hypocrite of the season and the
Yeah,
ridiculous moron. Like that was his role in Token Genius. That was the entertainment value he delivered. He wasn't a hero.
yeah.
He
Coach,
obviously thinks he is.
yeah,
That's
Coach
what's
does think
funny
he's
to
a
put
hero,
him
but
on the
that's why
villain.
he's a villain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's what is hilarious about it. And
right.
I might agree with you that this is my favorite Coach because this is Coach hoisted by his petard
Yes,
from the very moment the season
the
begins.
editors are having so much fun. Just like I mean, they were obviously having fun with Coach anyway, like in Token Sheets, but now it's like they know what they're getting. They also know how long he's going to be around, and they have a great time, and I have a great time.
Yeah.
Everybody has a great time except
And
for
they don't
maybe
need to
Coach.
lean on him for anything but watch this ridiculous asshole and see what we can do with him. Yeah, no, that one doesn't. Yeah, that one blows my mind that anyone would argue anything but him being a villain. And if you
Yeah,
think he's going to be a hero, he doesn't crack that top 5 of those heroes over there, so he's not
right.
on the season. The other one that people have talked about is Parvati. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently, if you believe what
Right.
people have said, Parvati was on the heroes tribe till they were like, hey, maybe we shouldn't put all the Black Widows together and moved her to the villains. For me, villains is the natural spot for her. And
Yeah,
I don't understand quite the argument against. Do you? I'll let you voice it.
it's tricky because I love Parvati. Um,
I love villains, so it doesn't bother me,
right, so it
right?
doesn't matter. Like I was still fully rooting for her as a villain. It's completely like I totally get like oh not wanting all the villains on or that was stupid not wanting all the Black Widows on the same tribe or whatever. It's interesting. Like I think people say it's weird because you have two people in the that same alliance on the heroes, and she's
Mhm.
seen as a villain. But I think if you look at their Cryons, they're labeled as their first season too. So that's one
Yeah.
thing. Obviously they wouldn't cast Parvati, I think, on this season from she was cast because of
Uh,
Mike,
yeah.
like obviously,
He was
but
in Micronesia because Candace dropped out.
yeah.
And yeah, but
But yeah, like she was not a hero in Cook Islands, whereas Suri easily a hero in Panama. Amanda, sure, in China,
yeah,
like
enough.
fine, it's fine. She's not a villain. She's neutral and was an important player,
Mhm.
so sure. But so that I guess could maybe tip the scales for that one because they need to find like the female heroes. And I mean, I think she relished it a little more.
Yeah, like Amanda was
So
always the reluctant member of the Black Widows to the
yeah,
point where it's like, is she a Black Widow or was it like Alexis and she just got taken out earlier?
yeah,
So that's fine. And then yeah, with Suri, it's just like, no, sorry, people fell in love with you in Panama, and nothing is going to change that perception of you, especially because you just have underdog elements always within your aura, even if you were Oprah in a gangster suit.
right.
Like they could
Plus,
do heroes versus villains again, and she would still be a hero.
plus with Suri, there weren't any real betrayals. Whereas like I mean, as much as we
Eric
don't
kind of looked pretty stupid due to her machinations, but
okay, yeah, but that was everyone, whereas like
yeah.
I think Parvati with turning on Ozzy was like they had a friendship from Cook
Mhm.
Islands, and so Rob is a villain from All Stars for other reasons, but it's like that sort of
Yeah.
vibe.
And
Um
then also from Marquesa, right? Like that's just
yeah,
that's the role that he plays is the Rob father, sarcastic stuff, and hers is
that's from The Godfather. Like,
and
oh
as
yeah.
ridiculous as it is one way or another, Parvati's role is the seductress, that's kind of role. That's obviously sells short what she's good at, but what she's good at is often like social manipulation,
Mhm.
which isn't a heroic thing as coded by Survivor and
Right.
frankly their main audience, which is always the hard thing for people to remember, is that they don't really program for us.
Yeah.
We're tuning in anyway. It's for the millions of other people who just like, oh yeah, sure, it's on, cool. I like this show, and then they watch people shouting at suitcases or whatever they used to watch before. So yeah, no, Poverty's a villain. I have no problem with that, and yeah, they just swap Candace and Sandra and everything would have been fine. But at the same time, I love Sandra on the villains tribe, and I'm glad she wasn't wasted on that dour ass heroes tribe.
Plus, you think you wouldn't have Sandra and Courtney
Exactly.
together, which is the greatest. But that doesn't come up yet, so we won't talk about that too much.
But you can bet we'll spend quite a bit of time, because that's the other reason why we chose this season is both of our favorite players are on this season. Rob with me, Courtney with you. But yes, I'm like the one person on the internet that will admit that they enjoy the work of Rob Mariano. And then another reason is 3 people that we'll wait. That could be spoilers, but there are people that on this season that we might see again.
That we have an interest in.
Yeah, so very topical. If people they were ever to do another all returning
season. The way they
season.
played, they changed everything. Yes. They just knew this game so well that they changed how it was played.
So last thought on heroes versus villains is just I think what Survivor does and what the effect that some people don't think about enough, although I think plenty of people do, is just by putting that theme, even if it's arbitrary and ridiculous to think of some people as heroes and some people as villains, the show has a way of getting its performers to buy in because they just hammer you over and over again with questions and themes and ideas. And I think it works really well in this season, with the heroes trying to be heroes and failing miserably, and the villains feeling like they have carte blanche to just do villainy things, which resulted in a lot of exciting moves that frankly would normally be considered dumb moves in some cases, and
some that still are.
Some that are incredibly dumb. But like getting rid of your strongest members in the middle. Who does that? Villains do. So that's something to keep in mind for future named seasons that might seem to have ridiculous themes that might end up resulting in what the producers are looking for.
I just hope that doesn't happen with millennials versus Gen X, but that is a podcast for
yes, that's the one we can talk about without worrying about spoiling people don't want that. That's the big worries and why I am already hating that season.
Yeah.
I will completely give it a free shake once it starts, but I am not looking forward to all the confessionals about how, this person 5 years younger than me is super entitled, whereas my generation really worked for what we wanted, even though that is not at all what people said about my generation when we were younger.
No, it's like I get why it's not to get cited. I get why it's not baby boomers because they are too old, but it makes no sense to be pitting Gen X against millennial. Whatever. Fine.
Well, I know, and maybe I'm also afraid that this season is just going to tear the Purple Rock apart.
Yeah. It is amazing how perfectly split it is because we even have Matt right on the edge.
Yeah, well, it's Matt. He wouldn't get cast. You're like, sorry, you just don't fit into this fairly narrow bucket. Yeah. All right, so so we talked about the odd fits in the theme, but is this the best cast ever assembled 1 through 20?
Yeah. Probably.
Well, hey, when you call it like you see it, when you're right, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I think without a doubt, that's the thing what really struck me watching the first episode in the intro. Is just like, man, these are the epic characters of Survivor, even more so than All Stars, because that had only 6 seasons to draw from, 7 seasons.
7, yeah.
I mean, at the time, those were the biggest names, but they hadn't been, the time hadn't been as long.
Yeah.
And obviously it was pretty good then, but Heroes versus Villains hasn't been surpassed in the past since then. But I would say 1 through 20, yes, because this is 20 better than ever before, but there is that 20th. And I think, Danielle is a bit of the really her. I
mean, that's the thing, because that I think really shows that this is the best cast, because you asked who would you replace? Who would be people you'd want instead? And, ignoring the impossibilities of your Colleen's, Elizabeth Hasselbeck's, etc. And especially for the people who need replacing, your Danielle's and Candace, just because she's on the wrong tribe, couldn't come up with a lot. couldn't really come up with
Yeah.
anything.
So yeah, I was like, how do we just make it like all legends or closer to? And for me, it's yeah, take out Danielle and put it in because the rest is okay. I think probably like Tyson or Randy are the least big names in the season, but Randy's pretty
Especially
easily
because
explainable. Like Gabon wasn't too long ago, and he was the big villain. Um,
and Tyson definitely has recency bias because Tocantins was right before, so it's like
yeah.
okay, fine.
Yeah, and like if they replace Tyson, and I understand because you already have Coach and JT, but I think he brought some athleticism, and they're obviously like
Mhm.
the names have been out there of who else like missed the boat, and everybody, yeah,
Right.
there's like 15 people that were the last member cut for Russell Hantz, and I'll say for each and
Right.
every one of them, yeah, you were cut for Russell Hantz, and you would be cut for Russell Hantz every single time. Like
Yeah.
Russell Hantz is probably like the third or fourth biggest name on this cast. So
Yeah.
sorry, Penner and Shane. But like there's some names, but honestly, like for me, they're all about on the same level as Randy and Tyson.
Mhm.
And it's like Penner, we already have like a bunch of there's like 4 other Micronesias. There's no room for you, Penner, and stuff like that. But for Danielle, I did have some names. So the first one that really leapt out of me, and one thing when I was thinking of replacements is you don't need to find a villain because she isn't really one.
Good point. Was not
And
thinking in
you could
that way.
just boot Candace over to the villain side and everything's fine. So you could pick a hero. The one I thought would be much more easily explainable is Danny from Guatemala.
I did think of Danny. That was one person I thought of.
But then the catch I thought of, and maybe why they wouldn't want to do it, other than maybe asked and she said no, is they're trying to get people to remember Steph as a hero. And
Right.
if you have
I
like
thought
the
of that
person that
too.
she just got destroyed in the final 2 for being awful to, because they basically act as though Guatemala Stephanie never happened, just as they
Yeah.
act as though Guatemala never happened. To the point where like they just keep having James talk about how she lost all the time. It's like, yeah, but there was also the time, you moron, where she went to the final 2 and it was in a majority tribe that like Pagong the other side. Do you remember
Yeah, but
that?
they probably didn't give Guatemala, in casting for them to watch ahead of time.
You saying
James
that
doesn't.
James is not a
James,
deep
James doesn't
historian
watch
of the
Survivor.
game?
I love James. I will defend James. James doesn't watch Survivor.
Well, you would have defended James. We'll see how much you defend James this season. So I think that could be an explanation why no Danny. So then I thought of, but a winner. You just don't have to worry about that. Like even if she's not a huge high profile winner, as frankly Sandra was not before the season started, you would never say, yeah, the winner doesn't deserve to be there.
Right.
And actually, one note I should say is while I'm spending this time trying to replace Danielle as the weak link, wouldn't Danielle like be a Titan compared to some of the people that are possibly coming back in the next season or have been brought back since?
Because she has like say what you will about Danielle, but she's got a personality at least.
Yeah, and she was like runner up. Meanwhile, like they're bringing back Monica Culpeppers and like Kelly Wentworth, who we loved, ended up loving, but realized that she had like 3 scenes her season.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying about Heroes versus Villains cast being so great that like a runner up feels like it's the pretty girl that they threw in, which is what she is. So I was thinking another runner up that was probably a little bit more higher profile was Nalia.
And Lord knows she would have said yes.
Well, I'm guessing though at that time she's starting to have babies.
True. Good point. Good point.
So we can take her out. Another winner is Jenna Maraska, who is far more famous than Danielle.
Yes, and you could put on the villains tribe just fine.
See, that's the one catch. Is of course she's the villain. She was the bitchy girl who everybody hated when she won.
Would you feel bad putting her as the villain given her last appearance?
That's right. So the last time we saw her, she leaves fairly heroically to be at her mother's dying bedside. And while this is going on, she is at the side of Ethan while he's going through cancer. So it's like you can't really do it. And then also maybe that's why she couldn't do it, right?
Right. Oh yeah, when that was actually happening. Yeah, because that was like I was thinking of like heroic men to like replace for. Although I don't know who I was thinking of replacing. I think I was just kind of wondering who else could have been. I was like, well, there's Ethan. Oh wait, when was that? Oh no. And yeah,
like the 5 hero men. It's like those are the obvious ones. Those are like 5 of the most popular ever. Like so. As much as I would have loved to have like Yule. Obviously, for one, Yule's probably always said no.
Right,
But
because you don't need Survivor.
yeah, but frankly, I
Yule's life
can't
is
make the
fine.
argument that they should have cast him over them, even though I would so much rather see him than, frankly, any of those five.
Mhm.
But that's me. And again, they don't cast the show for me. I'm watching
No.
anyway. If the Nicaragua didn't stop me from watching this show, nothing will. So then I know a name that was kicked around a lot, and a lot of fans in our group was Natalie Bolton. Apparently, was under
That is
consideration.
the one villainous woman I thought of, but I can't imagine they wanted to add another Micronesia person, even though the appeal is there because she's original Micronesia.
Mm-hmm.
She's not, but there's so many.
Yeah, and not only
many.
Micronesia, but the fourth Black Widow.
No. Right. Like, I get it. Like, I still think they need to, I would still like to see her brought back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that would have been insane. Like, that
yeah,
would have been insane.
I think that Natalie Bolton goes through that casting process in case one of those other three drop out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't add her as the fourth.
Yeah.
So then the name that I came up with that I think would have been more famous and possibly more interesting than Danny and would be an easy 1-for-1 swap is Heidi.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, nobody would. Yeah,
Jenna,
there's like
the same Jenna thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
but without all the baggage
of that season, famous, Playboy cover model, the whole deal. Like, if they would have cast Heidi, cool. If they would have said Heidi was on this season of Survivor, would you have been like, who? You would know who she is instantly, right?
I assume. I mean, it's hard to say what I would have remembered at that time, but
right. But I'm pretty sure we knew who Jenna and Heidi was because Survivor was a bigger deal then than it was in Panama, for instance. So that's the one what if. And then if you get to that point, I'm not all that shook up that Heidi was not on. So sure, Danielle.
Wait, sorry, I'm just like curious now. Okay, so Heroes versus Villains was 2010. So she was already married to Cole Hamels at that point. So she probably would have been like, you know what? I'm good.
It's not about the money. Maybe she just wants to do it for herself. She has to have her own project. The baseball season's long.
Yeah, but then it's also probably like, as the baseball wife, you have to be good and represent the team and rabble.
What about Steph? Was she married to a baseball player at that time?
I don't know if she was married to. You know what? I think if she wasn't married to him yet. First of all, Kyle Kendricks is no Cole Hamels. Sorry, that is a joke that pretty much only Matt will get. But,
that's all right. We are not above narrow casting at this show.
Yeah, but I did actually have that in my notes because she is wearing a Phillies cap. And I mean, for a while he was on the Phillies, so maybe.
All right. So that's who I got. Anybody in the comments below, if you want to write in who you think would be a better selection at that point in time. Again, nobody who would not come. Yes, of course, Colleen would be huge. Elizabeth Hasselbeck. You can't even say Julie Berry. Sadly, she cannot.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
And frankly, I would discount everybody in Samoa as well, especially since we know like Shambo has always said no.
Right.
Because I think this was the first time they went like extreme back to back.
Right, like Rupert was technically back to back, but I think I think
he had about at least a month or two. Like Russell Hantz had a week or whatever.
And I know some of China had aired when Pearl Island, or no, that's not. Micronesia came out. Also, not to harbor on this too much, but I looked it up, and Stephanie and Kyle Hendricks got married in 2010. So it really depends on when. So at the very least, she was probably engaged.
Yeah, maybe they had met at the pizza place. That'll make sense to you first-time viewers once you get to the reunion.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about it a bit in the way that the theme worked out, but I just wanted to talk a bit about like just kind of the opening scene. That was epic as fuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was so great. And like, and I don't just mean like the helicopters or whatever. Survivor does helicopters all the time, but yeah, and it kind of gets back to the discussion about the cast is like you just go, wow, these are the big names. And I think that's why it was great that they didn't just try to narrow it like they did with Micronesia, that like we're just doing Pearl Islands 2 or whatever. They reached back as far as Australia. Because I think they'd burned through the Borneo cast.
Yeah, pretty much.
Bad ways. Actually, that's one other name I did think of is Wigglesworth. I'm guessing she said no.
Right, because she does at least claim that she had been asked multiple times. So
Yeah, and I believe it.
I assume that's true. Yeah.
At this point, I think the show
I don't think
has
she's
everybody.
going to be asked back again.
No. But yeah, it was just like, yeah, we're getting like, Boston Rob, Parvati, Russell, Colby, Jerry, all this saying that. And then, the music swelling and the whole deal. It's just like, it's hard to top that for just kind of just feelings, even if you're a jaded Survivor fan.
Especially, I think it's hard to say for like later viewer people who weren't always and like no shade on not being someone who's been watching a show for 15 years. Like obviously that I'm not trying not to alienate people, Andy. Obviously, like sometimes age is a factor there, or just like
you're hella young. Come on. What's the excuse, folks? I don't care if you're younger than the show.
10, when it came out, like I could know that things were happening. I was like aware of stuff, but someone 10 years younger than me could easily be watching this show, and so wasn't born then. But it's hard to, I think, really explain like the scope of what like when it was happening, if you weren't like someone who's fully experiencing it live and stuff. It was just like there hadn't been a full All-Star season, since season 8. That's a pretty long time. I mean, I guess we waited similarly, but there was only one half All-Stars season, and Guatemala, that's barely. Obviously it's not.
And even then, like that was all stars of like 6th place Parvati and like
right.
Like there was a few, Eliza. Obviously these are names we liked, but these weren't the big names.
Yeah, like this was because Micronesia was also no winners and stuff like that. This was a really big deal. Like I remember. Like my mom and I being like really excited about it. I mean, there's a reason this is the season that a lot of people started getting back into the show. Yeah, and not just that it was a really good season, because that's not what gets you starting at the first episode.
Yeah, and it was in high def, so that's a big thing. I was jazzed just rewatching it this time. Just the intro, and then it kicks off with a pretty exciting challenge. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We don't really talk about challenges, but even within that challenge, it had a few pretty memorable moments. I think probably the most iconic is Sugar with the double guns. Yeah. You've
Steph dislocating her shoulder
and Courtney yelling about it.
Yeah. Well, that was before I was just like, break her shoulder, and then oops, they almost did. Rupert broke his toe.
So ankle lock to Tom, which really that was a huge dick move. Like it wasn't even doing anything. Yeah. And now that I know more, it's like Tom permanently messed up his legs out on those freaking buoys. And so goddamn, I hate Russell. But,
and then there will be plenty of time for that. And of course, because you won't stop hearing about that, Coach frog marching Colby to the mat. But that
brings us back to the intro and Colby's, all with foreshadowing. It's like, I'm doing this to see if I still got it.
I'm like, oh, honey. Oh.
Right away. They underline that, and then they show us not so much. Stick to Gillette commercials there, cowboy.
Rob's. It doesn't happen yet, but Rod's first confessional is similarly painful. He's like, they should get rid of me right away. They never do. Like,
almost, but not quite. Yeah, no. And again, that's the other thing about why this intro was so great. And obviously our Edgic friends will tell us that they're all like this. They all, underline and foreshadow what will happen, and not to go back into that, because again, y'all were right, but so much there, so much. And
I think you just don't get that same effect when it's not established characters. Yeah. Like we're rewatching and they're people you're already familiar with, so it's like you're watching the first time, you're like, yeah, it has been a decade since you last played Colby. Let's see if you've still got it.
You still look good. Yeah, I'm sure you can be awesome.
Although Rob, I mean, I guess it wasn't right away in my cases, but it's not like they kept you around for a long time.
He dominated that first tribe, though.
Yeah.
Last hunter.
Yep.
Look at a website that might talk about how that changed Survivor.
I love
Uh,
it.
yes.
That was
But
me.
yeah, it's just right up from the bat. The season is great, and then we get into the tribes, and so just a thought we had while discussing that villains tribe is so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I
It's
was thinking,
good.
like, how much more fun would it have been without Russell Hantz? And I don't mean this, it's like Russell Hantz ruined the season, because I actually think that he is a big reason why the season is one of the best of all time. But he broke up like this glorious grouping of shit talking villains.
Yeah, well, yeah, like the camaraderie, and because you can definitely see, you can see in little scenes, and you can see sort of after the fact that like Courtney and Parvati, like totally, I think, kind of connected and were like friendly and stuff like that. And then they were obviously on very different sides and stuff. So it's like, imagine if they all could just chill because all they have to do is get rid of Randy, and then they're just hanging out, like, because they start winning and stuff, and then they can just, instead of Tyson, they probably all just decide to get rid of Coach or Danielle or someone who just makes things unpleasant, and then it's just great, and they just hang out.
Yeah, and they probably would have kept winning, so they could have kept talking. Because, like, one of the best subplots running through the first three episodes, and maybe it's actually just in one episode, but it's so funny, is the way that the villains tribe just keeps egging on Coach and Jerry for their showmance that really isn't. And it's totally for their own amusement, and I love it.
And I will give Russell credit that he totally is like in on that trolling game, and like him and Parvati sort of teasing Coach about it. It's like a couple of like high school kids like talking about like, yeah, I hear she likes you, and like, oh my god, are you gonna ask her to prom? You totally should. Oh my god, you guys would be so cute together. And it's like Russell doing that, like, yeah, you should go for it, man. He's like
And it
on
just
board.
totally feeds into Coach's view of himself, and he's probably just so excited, like, yeah, people are finally seeing me as this guy. And then
Of
on the
course
other
he'd
side,
be
like,
into me. Who wouldn't be?
yeah, and then on the other side is like Courtney and I think Sandra and stuff were like egging on Jerry, and it's just so funny, and I love it. And
They all see it. Like they all. It's like that moment when you just are totally like, oh, they're gonna do it.
even though I don't think it ever really got to that level at all,
No.
I think a lot like there was probably a little bit of spark, and more of it was just like an extension of what they were doing in their spare time when they weren't building shelters or anything like that. Because but it's just like teasing Coach,
Yeah.
because another great scene in the opener is when Sandra and Rob are just like betting over whether he's going to break his neck going after the coconut.
Yeah. And then of course I love that when he decides not to go, it's not just like he didn't go. He's like, I could have, I could have, but if I had fallen, it wouldn't be worth it. I'm like, oh, so you thought you were gonna fall?
Yeah, it's just like that could have been what the season was, and frankly, it was probably better the way it ended up, at least in terms of like excitement and stuff. But there's just like it's just such a great collection of like cynical smartasses on that tribe, and it was so much fun. And
There are people.
yeah, exactly. It was what shows is that how like the heroes versus villains dichotomy ended up working often the opposite way. The villains tribe was the fun tribe, even though they weren't getting stuff done. They didn't have the physical threats. Meanwhile, on the heroes tribe, not as much fun. This is because they're not fun. They're not funny people. Before we leave the villains tribe, though, I would just want to kind of highlight a bit. And another reason why this season is great is the storytelling. And the first big story of the season is Russell versus Rob, and we started to get it right away. Any observations?
Yeah, I was like, that was a statement.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, yeah. Usually how this works is I talk until like my voice gets so quiet and I stop talking. And John's like, okay, I can listen now and start talking again.
Here's a chance. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I think Russell does not realize that everyone else not knowing who he is the best thing that could have happened to him. Russell wants to be, Russell should also realize that, I mean, I guess the season hasn't aired yet, so he doesn't know how, like, for sure how big of a character he is on Samoa. But, Russell doesn't really, he's still going to get a lot of airtime. He's still going to be considered one of the stars. But Russell wants them to think he's a star, and they don't know who the fuck he is. So he does it. And he's like, I'm the king of Survivor. Like, Rob's not the king of Survivor. And Rob, although little does Russell know, he did not win Samoa. So really, he and Rob are at similar levels at that time. But in fact, I think Rob probably got one more vote with fewer jury members. So,
yeah. He lost by one vote.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, he feels like everyone's stealing his shine, even because nobody knows who he is. But he's still getting plenty of shine. He just can't see it yet.
Yeah, and that is an actual fun part at this part of the season. That is a little bittersweet eventually, is that, you just see him bristling. Like, why are these, and he's saying it at first, like, it's great that I'm finally playing with people who know how to play the game.
Yeah.
And he's not just saying it in front of them, like he says it in confessionals too, but then you feel it bristle. Like, why isn't everything about me? I'm Russell. I'm Russell Hantz.
He is so jealous that Coach has a crush on Rob.
And I love the Coach crush on Rob.
Like,
we're going to double into that more in later episodes. But
Coach has a bigger crush on Rob than he does on Jerry. And Russell is not having it. I don't know why Russell expects anyone to have a crush on him, but everyone, including Parvati. And it's like, Russell, sweetie, Parvati doesn't actually... That's just how she is with everyone.
And he will never figure that one out because she is awesome at this and he is something else. But yeah, and the foreshadowing is there. And I'll flat out admit right now that as Heroes vs. Villains was airing, I was pissed when Russell won this battle. And not just because it meant Rob was going home, because frankly, I did not have great expectations for Rob because of what happened in All Stars. I figured he'd be too big a threat. Right. In fact, as the season went on, I'm like, what, is he really going to do this? And this, we'll talk more about Rob in the coming episodes, but it was more just that Russell won and it bothered me. Mm-hmm. But it turns out that he won one battle. And the story of the season isn't so much about that. And so it actually turned out to be a very great season as a result. Probably better that Russell moved on to lose later than necessarily, Rob frog marching to the end, because we've seen that season and people don't love it. Yeah. Not even I love that one. So, yeah, the foreshadowing's there, and that's a story we are going to track for the next 2 episodes until it is not the story anymore. Another thing I love at the Villains Camp, it just kind of shows how fun they are, just kind of the dynamic. And what goes into this is when jealous Russell decides that he's gonna enact his trademark chaos that can never lose Survivor, and hides the machete.
Jason.
And he just doesn't care. Nobody cares. He's like, they're gonna lose their minds when this happens. And what if I'm gonna take his B cap? And they just laugh about it because they're villains. They don't care.
Also, it led to Russell praising the Houston Astros in 2010, but
they're gonna dominate the National League forever. See, now we're narrowcasting for him. That's right. Yeah, I think we've got like 7 or 8 baseball fans, so we're good there. I can't imagine any of them are Houston Astros fans, but hey, maybe let us know. Certainly not as many as Boston Red Sox, although maybe I wouldn't be surprised if we also do not have Boston Red Sox fans, because
I don't know. Do we have anyone from Massachusetts?
Well, we don't have a lot of asshole fans, so that's probably it.
Oh,
yeah, there it is. So let's go to the other side and the heroes, which
do we have to?
We do, because they took
they
took a lot of L's in these 2 episodes, and frankly, it's kind of a good look for them.
Yeah. Well, where do you want to start? With their obvious first vote, or
well, let's just talk in general. So they construct a great camp. They're the great workers. They're the workers.
They sure do catch some chickens. I will.
That's right. It wasn't quite a top 10 chicken moment,
no,
but It happened, and good for them. And then they just like fall apart immediately, and it's fun. For me, the fall of the heroes from their elevated perch of we are the awesome, honorable people is one of the small pleasures of heroes versus villains, because the entire hypocrisy of the idea that we are the people that don't betray people has always bothered me about Survivor. And frankly, when you do a heroes versus villains season, maybe a worry is that they're just going to reinforce that. But the game has other plans, man. And everybody gets their hands dirty.
Pure sweet JT.
Yeah, and I think JT went in there like, I'm going to prove to everybody that I was also the brains of the operation.
Right.
And so, like,
I think what we really proved is that JT and Steven need each other.
That's right. Because I think after this season, people are like, "Oh, not so smart after all." Maybe James, and then Stephen comes back, and it's like, "Yeah, no, I think you guys are a hybrid."
It's you know what? It's been too long since I took biology, but
yeah,
they need each other. Symbiotic.
Like if they were running like campaigns, JT's the candidate, and he's going to be able to get the votes. But Steven is he's the campaign manager. He's the guy that ends up being the chief of staff. He is just as integral to the success, but you're not going to get those votes.
Yeah. One thing that sort of mirrors, in a sense, the heroes thing and Russell being jealous of Rob is that you see Rupert suddenly just really hate Stephanie. Just really anti-Stephanie. And I was wondering, like, I had in my note, I was like, is he just, and like then Stephanie even realizes it herself. It's like, is she just mad that I like became like the big deal like right after his season? I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah, easily.
That's what happened.
Yeah, no, Rupert has to be the fan favorite, and
Can you imagine if Ozzy had been there?
Well, I think that's actually interesting. Where would Ozzy be? I guess after Micronesia, a hero.
Well, if Parvati is,
even though he was like a douchebag, so because everybody forgets what a giant douche he was at the beginning of Cook Islands.
Yeah, I know it's true. But I mean, Stephanie was still a hero after Guatemala.
Yeah. So yeah, Ozzy would have been there, but it's the fun thing about
still dating.
I doubt it. I doubt that lasted that long. Barbara Anderson will have to tell us in the comments.
Yes. I know it lasted outside of Micronesia, but I don't know how long.
But yeah, the heroes just they take they get all excited about. Did they win the opening challenge?
They did.
Yes.
Despite all their injuries and lost articles of clothing, they won the opening challenge.
Right, which basically, spoiler alert, but the theme of the challenges are when it was muscle based, the heroes won, and anything that wasn't, they lost. Until the villains, decided winning wasn't all that important.
Because they won when there were puzzles, because they had Rob, and Rob is good at puzzles, and then
they didn't. But yeah, and so yeah, they won that one, and they were all excited, and then they take one loss, and they just completely fall apart. And I think what happened a lot on the Heroes tribe is that was the tribe that had the bigger pre-gaming going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least if you're listening to Stephanie before and after, that's what was happening.
And I mean, there's one particular instance that I knew nothing about until talking to you, actually, which blew my goddamn mind. But I don't know how much we want to reference that. So
I think we'll get into it when we get into the boots. But it's another example of no matter how far you take pre-gaming, it often don't work. But obviously you had the Amanda James,
right,
plus Sari as at least somebody they could work with, and I think that's what. Meanwhile, like Tom, Stephanie, Colby really didn't do any, not just pre-gaming, like possibly going out there, but they weren't involved in the Survivor community. And actually, this is a quick question I had for you. How many people on this season do you think Colby had heard of?
Jerry.
So Jerry, obviously.
Jerry and Rob.
Rob, Rupert, because Rupert
Rupert.
and Robert were on All Stars with
They
him.
were on All Stars.
He might not know Rupert's
Maybe,
name, but he recognizes him.
maybe Sandra because of Rupert.
Yeah, and just like he was
And it's
maybe
early
vaguely
enough.
aware of Survivor back then. Maybe like he would watch it at Probst house back then or something like that.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
that's the entire list. Like when he's talking to Candace about
I
like
was gonna
sussing
bring that.
out who's on who, he has no idea who Candace
And
is.
like poor Candace is only she's like say what you will, like I was not someone who liked Candace, but Candace is a fan. Candace watches the show.
Mm.
And so Candace, she's talking about these people. She's only talking because she knows the show. Like she's
Yeah.
like, she's saying people who know each other because they're seasons, and then he's trying to find out the social dynamics like outside. This she's like, I mean, I don't like know them because Candace was like in medical school. She didn't have. She might still talk to Parvati, but like she didn't have time for that nonsense. But like, sorry that if you could hear
Another high-speed chase in Los Angeles.
always when is there not. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, like she was in medical school. She pushed back her wedding to go on Heroes versus Villains, so she obviously had like a very she was living her life, man. Like
Yeah.
she's not
But
going.
I just love that scene because there's no way Colby knows who most of these people are. He has no idea who James is.
Exactly.
And I think that's the where they started from behind is that they had no connections, and the heroes I think were very much ruled by previous games, and like this is their pre-gaming. Yeah. Whereas I don't get that impression with the villains. There's the rumors that Parvati was told about Russell, but obviously they didn't ever talk about it because he was busy. And all the other things that go down there, like it very much feels like Rob and Tyson met for the first time. So another strike I think against the value of pre-gaming, which okay, this can lead into the first discussion of the boot. Sugar, her pre-gaming didn't really work all that well.
No, it did not. No, it did not. I mean,
you know what? I'm just gonna let Barbara Anderson say it in the comments. We don't need to talk about it.
Because like the thing is, it's like what happened after she gets voted out is like too, and like I don't want to make fun of that. So, like it's oh my god, I can close my window, but I don't know how much that's gonna cover.
And here I am wearing headphones to prevent feedback. Let's
I can't control the streets, Andy.
But you don't put a sign out? Like I have right on my door, do not come in. Unfortunately, the people that would come in can't read that well. But I think they're asleep. But yeah, so Sugar, on first glance, super obvious boot. She is the misfit of that tribe. And frankly, even for herself, it's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be here. And then obviously things that happen afterwards really underline that fact. That's, I think, the one we can reliably say she did not hang around Ponderosa, we'll say. And
for good reason.
Yeah. And I don't know, when we were discussing earlier, I have no problem with her being cast. Sugar was a big deal coming out of Gabon, which was a fairly recent season. But the other time, but now that we know in retrospect, was that Tom and Steph and Colby's last chance at being able to do something in this game?
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, sure, if they get Sugar, like because clearly, because they're all everyone's like, yeah, obviously Sugar, like duh, and then
and honestly, the person really leading that charge seemed to be Colby, so
yeah, and then so it's like because Colby hasn't watched Survivor in forever, so it's like the like not physically strong outcast, for Spoo.
And the one that's like pushing up against me in the shelter every night. I just want to sleep. I ain't no Hershey bar. Yeah.
I thought I was done with that. But yeah, and then Stephanie's like, wait, this is too easy. We should strike. We should vote Amanda. And then that side is like, oh, we should do Stephanie. And obviously people they ended up talking amongst themselves because then they all vote for Sugar anyway. So that must have, they just punted that one. Look, I made him
dynamic. The heroes, of course. It's like it's got to be one of these three women. It can't be anybody but a woman. We would never
Right.
even consider voting out the super old pirate with a broken toe. It has to be a woman. Meanwhile, the villains did not vote out a woman first. They discussed it, and we'll discuss that that wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Their reasonings for voting it were very different,
yes,
or for thinking about voting her were very different, and it comes out every time she plays. But yeah, I'm trying to think though. I mean, okay, so if they get Sugar on their side, that's four. What do I mean? Obviously, she didn't have that much pull with JT.
yeah,
So, like,
and
who
that's the
else? Like,
thing. Like
maybe they can get Candace, but like, I don't know. Like, somehow Candace ends up like linking with Suri. I'm not really sure how that pairing happens, but it does. And Suri is clearly, Amanda and James, who have been playing with each other every time they've played. So
yeah, and like it's never worked out for James, but that guy he just doesn't hold a grudge. And I
yeah,
suppose like Micronesia, one Amanda did not vote him out, and it
yeah,
sounded
no
seems
one did
like she didn't.
technically.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like she didn't want to, but I think she
Mm-hmm.
would have.
Oh yeah,
Um,
there's no.
and then obviously, like yeah, she was one of the party to the people who made him to be a complete fool in China. But no, let's do it again. Let's run it back. Me and you and Amanda. This is the third time it's going to work. Uh, yeah, ultimately, like it would have been preferential to get rid of somebody on the other side and keep somebody who was not a threat to them, especially in the way that things work out. But the votes just weren't there.
Yeah,
JT, I don't think was interested in keeping Sugar, obviously, and like I said, Colby wasn't because Colby is not a strategist in modern Survivor terms. I think the idea that Colby did not play a strategic game in Australia is overwrought. I think he actually did. It's just a completely different type of strategy that is no longer valid. But yeah, I mean, Sugar, it was just going to be Sugar, and I
yeah,
think where they if they had a chance later, it wasn't that. Um, Actually, so we've talked a bit about how JT was a decision maker in that and danced around the fun rumors that you can look up for yourself. Honestly, I don't even know it's fun really, but
yeah. It's
it's
kind
a
of
nugget of trivia that we know. And then he's a the decision maker again in the next vote, or at least positioned as it, and even more so in that challenge. It's JT. He's done this before. He's going to
right.
lead us to victory. Um, and obviously, when it doesn't go down, Steph takes all the heat for talking. But like, did JT actually try to lead them in that challenge? Because I don't really remember him saying much that they were talking over.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's like it's hard for me to focus that much on a challenge that I've seen before and know the result of because it's hard for me to focus on the team, especially challenges anyway. Um, maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, it's just like they keep saying like, "Oh, JT's the decision maker," and it seems like his deal right now is I want to avoid making a decision. And I'll say like that's probably where the Sugar vote even became easier. He wasn't forced into a corner, and he could still play both sides. And I think that's actually astute for him. The
hmm
longer he can be undeclared, the more things could break his way.
hmm
Because losing that first one, the heroes might also think that they're not going to go ahead and lose like most of the next ones. So
Right.
he could have maybe we're not going to tribal council again for 3 times. Nobody needs to know what side I'm on, and I could pick a side with more data. But he just doesn't ever really seem to be much of a decision maker, so much as I better do what's over here, and we never really get why JT is deciding one way or another. So it's kind of a weird edit of showing like he's the swing vote, he gets to decide, but we're not that invested in what he decides. And I'm guessing some of that either it's just not there, or once JT finally makes a decision this season, does not go so well. But
Yeah.
I'll just say in the challenge, I always felt it was more than unfair the heat that Stephanie took, and obviously, we'll get into that right now. But it's not just that like James was an asshole. It's like I don't think JT was doing anything, and I think if she started saying something, it was because they were just kind of standing around doing nothing, and then the absence. Yeah, I think that Stephanie did try to step up because the heroes suck at this.
Maybe JT was like only he's giving directions, but it was only in Southern, and so only James could understand him.
That's right. And he mumbled it, and we're good old running boys. And that's right. This is going to be a season of really terrible accents for me. Congratulations, everybody. I bet you're excited about that.
He's so bad at them. So
Um,
bad.
well, because in Canada we don't have accents. There's it's just a flat tone. Absolutely, there's nothing I say that sounds funny to a non-native ear. Um, let's talk a bit about James.
All right. I mean, I'm probably gonna be a bit on an island here. I mean, he was not being nice, okay? But I think a lot of this, like, James is the heel turn, is like a little overblown because it's just like, yeah, he was not being nice. He was yelling, but it was like the yelling stuff was not particularly cruel or like in terms of like what the content is. And I think a lot of it is just sort of like, frustration with what's happening and stuff. And, she's in the other line. Like, that it's a sticking point for me when someone starts saying bullying, and when like Tom and like grown men, say that James talking about this was like bullying, it just struck me as odd. Like, it was like, yeah, sure, he's like yelling, but it wasn't like, you are a bad person and like do not belong. It was like, yeah, you're not listening and you lose a lot and stuff. I don't know. And then something like in the next episode when Tom describes it as like brutish kind of like made me wince a little bit. It seemed like just like a loaded word.
Yeah, and honestly, two sides there. For one, when I was watching these episodes, I still was reminded that I love Tom Westman. I love him. He's great. I like some of what he was saying, but I do think there was probably some coded language there.
And I don't think,
Shockingly, from a New York firefighter.
and I will say, I don't think it's, and I think this is true of like people in the room. I don't think it's necessarily something he realizes
No.
is code, because that's what I think. That's a whole discussion. But like, I think that like a lot of people, they just don't know. They just don't know that that's like a thing, and you don't know what's like been ingrained in you. But yeah, it was just like I mean, he is this like huge guy, but there's still just like, this guy I'm picking on the girl and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was a little
We're dancing around it because nobody wants more to hear about like racial politics from two of the whitest people you see on YouTube outside of Sweden. But yeah, there's that. But I mean, it's also a huge man, and he's a huge man bearing down on a younger woman. And I do think and I understand your sensitivity that like anytime anybody does something negative to anybody that they is feeling like underdogish on Survivor, the bully word starts coming out. But if people are live on the ground are remarking upon it, I give that a little bit more credence because obviously they're seeing more, and I think it is a stance, and it's some of it is the standard issue Survivor social dynamics of James wasn't. He has the bigger alliance. She is outside of his alliance. So he has the power to berate her. And as Stephanie even mentions it, she can't defend herself that much because she's walking on eggshells trying to save herself. And
true. I mean, and
that's where bullying comes in, right? He has more social power, and he is using that to make somebody else feel smaller. And I mean, obviously, some of this is Survivor, and Survivor, as much as we love it, is inherently unnice in some areas. Is that I'm going to form a group of people to vote out people outside of my group, and I will find the reasons to do so, even if they're bullshit, because I have to vote you out, and human beings feel better about doing those things when they have justifications. So yeah, I absolutely think that's some of what was going on in James, but I also do think that this was the beginning of the fall of James, which I do believe is a story throughout, whether legitimate or not. But like Jeff Probst was remarking on it.
Yeah. And there is, I mean, I think there's probably the sense that what we've seen recently was on such a different level that now it's like how even Jerry remarks in the beginning how like she was seen as this evil villain, and now it's like totally tame, and sort of it's and that was 18 seasons prior, but like this maybe it's like, well, after you hear someone being told they have no soul, saying you lose a lot of challenges, like doesn't seem so bad. And something I'll say actually even against my own perception is there's probably the sense that like that Stephanie is this tough, this tough chick, and so she can handle it. But like, you still shouldn't talk to people just because they seem tougher, and she's not like petite or anything.
Yeah, and more than that, like he was, very aggressive language. Like obviously later when he's talking to people and he's doing his James thing where he finds like one semi clever thing and he just keeps repeating it over and over again. She lost every single time. Nobody in the exactly that's exactly what I was getting at. And this time it was like nobody in the history of ever been there, and she's the only one. She's the only one. Another great impression by me. My God, I'm on fire.
I do feel like I'm like, oh, James, that's such a flawed argument. Like, because she was obviously viewed as the best of that one.
Yeah, and also
again, everyone else sucked.
She was the runner-up in her next season. Like she's done far better as Survivor than you ever have, James. But
James has never won an individual challenge. Yes. You know who has? Courtney.
And I believe Stephanie, maybe.
Yes, but I just want to say that Courtney.
Yes, of course, Courtney.
Courtney won.
Courtney. So that, but like he told her to shut up, very aggressively, and that's something. And then more in the fall of James and how, because James was awesome in China, delightful presence. Even when he gets voted out, he's still a lot of fun on the jury. Yes. Micronesia, he was still pretty good. He got a little smug at times, which is what tends to happen when people are in good positions. And then when he fell and was in a bad position, maybe he said a few things that were, sexual politic-y, not great. But honestly, he was a guy who was trying to come to terms with the fact that he was about to lose again. Yeah. So, and then again, he's delightful on the jury. But here, not so much. And the other thing, besides the way he, just constantly berated Stephanie, was his performance in the challenge against Randy.
Yeah, it's because like the actual act, I think, is it's like, I mean, it's such a.
Oh, he finished them off quickly. That's easy.
Fine. Why did they even match them up? I'm not sure.
I have an answer for that, but I'll let you finish.
Okay, but and so you see it, everyone knows. Like, honestly, if I were Randy, I would have just jumped off. Like, why bother? They were losing so badly anyway, too, at that point, that there was really just but
if the chronology of the edit is correct,
right? True, and it could be true, but the just, and even though it's coming, the quickness of the knock off the thing is so sudden that I just burst out laughing because it's just shocking. It's just but yeah, it's you don't need to throw it down.
When he spikes it in his face and then taunts him afterwards, that is a continuation of James, no more Mr. Nice Guy James. And maybe being humiliated on Survivor Past, I can understand makes you want to be that, and it's also kind of the fun. Getting back to the theme, we're not here to be heroes anymore. Perhaps, unless I'm Rupert, I'm always here to be what you want me to be.
Even if it means being the same blood as my wife.
That's right. I don't know the testing methods back then, but yeah, that's just a jerk move. Now on to why Randy faced off against him. That was Randy's idea. They recognize anybody who faces James is going to lose anyway, and probably anybody Randy faces is going to lose. So consolidate those into one L.
That's actually.
That's actually really smart.
That's actually a really smart strategy. Which, I mean, further, so I'm then don't that sounds out, but don't. Why even try smack talking? Just jump off.
That's Randy being Randy, and probably the villains being villains.
This is probably a little unfair, and we have no evidence of it. But given because we did already see James acting like a jerk, so it could totally have just been James acting like a jerk. But my own prejudice against Randy, because we are not Gabon fans, we do not find Randy charming even now. Sorry, I don't. I think he's a dick. But in the back of my head, I wonder. It's what else was said? Did he? Could he have said something that made him want to do that? But he very easily might not have. And he was and James was just being a jerk. I have no idea. I have no evidence.
And obviously we don't. But just from the edit, there's the continuation of aggro James.
Right.
James, because in China he wasn't part of the main group right away. He fell into that once Aaron was taken out, and Todd started to wonder and gave him a couple idols. Right. In Micronesia, he was part of the big group, but he was just kind of there. And honestly, the other side wasn't a challenge anyway.
Right.
This is the first time James is taking control right away, and it ends up not being a good look for him. And I don't think it ever gets any better. And we'll discuss some of it later. Even though he does have one of the better lines of the season, so that's a story worth tracking. Yeah. So
Although, if we can have a quick moment of positivity from James is when they're killing the chickens. I know this is a funny 115 entry, but like JT's killing the chicken or something. He just has this confessional about how it reminds him of his grandma used to do things just like that, and she would just shake the chicken, and we would all scream, and good times. It was traumatic, but good times.
maybe that's what set James off. It's like, there should have been a trigger warning before, which is a term that I'm sure people will be throwing into confessionals in snide ways next season. So moving on to the next boot, Stephanie goes, and there's the question. So we already discussed how saving sugar to use for their alliance was not really an option. Is there anything she could have done to save herself?
For Stephanie, I mean, I think, probably if, maybe from the beginning, figure out that Candace doesn't know anyone and, bond with her as, an athletic female, of probably roughly the same age. I don't know how, but I feel like they were probably both at least in their 20s.
Right? Yeah, they'd probably be on the same generation tribe at the very least.
God damn it. But, and see someone, who's on the outside there, and, I mean, Suri, that's hard to say if they'd be able to pull, because, again, they need the right amount of people. But, or if she could convince them, why get rid of, why not get rid of Colby, or who is Rupert with?
So Rupert seemed to be immediately with James and Amanda.
Yeah, I guess. But it's how did that happen?
Really isn't. Yeah, and I think maybe there was. Sounds like there might have been some pre-gaming there. Yeah, people can let us know in the comments that follow that a little bit more. But I think Amanda might have been a little more aggressive with that sort of thing. It's actually funny. A little side note. And you probably maybe heard this from Randy's RJP, that his pre-gaming was with a bunch of people who were never cast. It's like Ace apparently was in casting or whatever. So
also don't pre-game with the people who were on your season.
Yeah, I think he's looking like Marcus and Ace. It's you should have those guys in the bag.
Yeah.
But if you're missing Tom or Granny, who else are you calling? Really? Right. Who's taking your call?
But because I doubt Amanda did any pre-gaming with James besides oh my god, yay, we get to play together again. Cool.
Yeah. But
stay tight.
I think what Stephanie maybe could have done, who knows, success or fail, but we didn't really see this, is we did see her approaching Candace and Suri, at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
Which is usually unsuccessful, but if the edit is at least to be believed, those two were at least taking phone calls, in free agents parlance, if they weren't actually shopping around. But both her and Tom just did terrible jobs with the cell. Mm-hmm. And it's just the classic thing of, hey, instead of being at the bottom of that alliance, how about you come on over to ours and be at the bottom of ours, At that point, what you need to do, if you're Stephanie or if you're Tom, and I'm not going to bother mentioning Colby because that's a dead end, is sell out the other two. And it's hey, why don't we make a final 3-pack? Or, even better, the person I'm talking to now, me and you, final 2. You don't need to worry about hanging on the end of Amanda and James and Rupert.
And
let's do this thing. Let's run this, because I think people have done this in the past. They did it in Micronesia, where they approached Suri with thinking that she'll be happy enough at 5th place. And that's not Suri. She's not.
Suri wants to win.
Yeah, and I think if you offer her a real solid finals deal, because I don't think the other side gave her that, she would have flipped. But if not, she's what?
The man not taking her to the end. She literally knows that.
She didn't. So that's what they should have done. Either Stephanie or Tom should have been approaching them as, we need to run this tribe, not join me and these other two losers. It's you count those guys out, and let's take out one of Amanda and James. They're the dangerous power duo. And I think that could have had some success.
Do you think they were wrong in choosing I get why they figured Amanda, although it was weird for them to be if we're doing a weaker person, it should clearly be Amanda. And I'm Amanda like wins like a good
Why
amount
not
of
Rupert?
yeah. Like pick someone that's and also not just that, like the weak thing, and like you don't want to tell Candace and Suri that you're targeting the weaker player, like physically weaker players, first of all. But like even if Suri was pulling the like, hey, she didn't take me to the end, I'm not necessarily with Amanda, like maybe target someone she doesn't know as well, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And like someone who isn't in, say, Candace's demographic. And Candace, who watches the show, knows that Parvati, who I mean, I don't know if they kept in touch, but like she was friends with Parvati on Cook
Mm-hmm.
Islands, and knows that Parvati is friends with Amanda. Like she might be thinking ahead of that being like a connection, you know? So they target someone none of them are close to, and like Rupert has a goddamn broken toe,
Yeah.
or
Or the other thing
James.
is, the thing you always do. Who do you want
Yeah,
out? You know,
yeah,
like let's us three form a final three. Colby and Steph can, if I'm Tom, for instance,
right.
Colby and Steph can just be our, fourth or fifth. Like they're not any use to me right now. I need your help. How can I be part of you? And actually, sorry, this would probably even be easier for Steph to make that argument because it's like us three women. Those guys are,
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and they didn't do that. They were like, they were doing their dunder-headed heroes thing. Like, we're going to play honorably, and what you want to be with us? Because I think if you get those, you also get JT. Like JT
Right.
isn't loyal to that side. He's just not going to stick his neck out. And I will say, like, their argument is like, if it's going to be Steph this time and it's going to be you and you, that's also like insulting. Like, oh,
Yeah.
it's clearly you guys are going to be next because you're weaker. And I think
Yeah.
as soon as you approach Cherie with that, she's out. And like that's what happened in Micronesia, where Penner and Yowman are all like, no, join with us, be our fifth. It's kind of funny though that they weren't wrong about
Right.
Suri,
I
but
did. I did have an. I was like, well, she has that going for her at least.
yeah, so they were right. You were the next out, but obviously through different means.
Right.
Uh, all right, and then the last photo of the episode, and these episodes, first time the villains go to tribal council, and it's Randy. And first instinct is obvious as the heroes,
Mhm.
and let's pour one out. The Gabon rewatch ends now.
Yeah.
The epilogue is over, and none too soon. However, unlike the sugar thing, where I just think it was a non-starter, the votes weren't there. I kind of think, and I've thought this for a long time, that voting out Randy might have cost Rob the game.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, it's the same thing like in Micronesia. Penner was like, I guess he must have just seen something on Cook Islands, like playing with her because there was no game evidence there, but was like, Parvati, not even like can't trust her, but like she's too good, she's a threat. We got to get rid of her. Now they have that evidence of Parvati, like real concrete evidence. And Coach of all people actually really lays out why Parvati is good, and not in the like, oh, she's flirtatious. Like it's mentioned in a way, but like he describes it in a way that it's not even really like sexual flirtation. It's just like a way that because she's a woman talking to a guy, it'll be perceived that way. But it's just that, she's charming. She makes you feel good just by talking to her,
Yeah, I think Coach's read was the exact right read on Parvati and like everything that I've heard about her
Yeah.
from former survivors. When you are with Parvati, she makes you feel like you're. It's kind of like what people would say about Bill Clinton and stuff. Like you're the only person
Right.
in the room. You feel better just being around it, and that is dangerous. It's actually the thing about Coach. Every once in a while, when he drops the Coach bullshit,
Yeah.
he is actually really perceptive, and we saw that throughout South Pacific. He just could never get away from himself, and that's why he lost.
Right. Like, I mean, with Parvati, like I've mentioned this to you guys, like privately, like I think when it actually happened, but like many years ago when I was working at this bakery, she came in and was like, and I like talked, but like, oh, like I really, I was really rooting for you, and here's this villain, so I'm a big Survivor fan, and like she was like so nice, and like she actually, because our shirts had these awful puns on them that I hated, and so she was like, oh, my friend would love this, like can I, like she took a picture of me, like this thing, and like it's just like, oh, Parvati is here, shine starry eyes,
Yeah. And like that's what people say, like, oh, social game, and she's a great social gamer, and absolutely she is, but it's just like it's her natural charisma.
Yeah.
That's what people are responding to. I don't know. Yeah, and I think she's also very strategic, so she knows how to use that both
Right.
in Survivor and life. And yeah, Probst, because he's not a deep thinker in the world, always trying to bring that down to, like, the temperatures, the sexual level, but that's not it. And Coach totally called it.
Yeah.
And who else called it was Randy, who basically, in his confessionals and in his discussions with people to try and save himself, laid out the entire season. Randy called everything that was going to happen. He was 100% right. And I think they blew their chance to get rid of Parvati and to completely take control of the game.
Yeah.
And
I'm
obviously it
glad
took,
they didn't, but
yeah, and look, it took extraordinary circumstances for it to come together. And I understand why you think, no, like, we got a big alliance here. We can get rid of her later. Randy is a pill to be around. And to which he himself admits, like, he was not ready to come back to Survivor. He was still, this big misanthrope. I doubt much has changed in that point, but he's gotten older and more mature.
more but he was already he's already
Yes,
old.
but maturity ain't always about age.
That's what I keep telling you guys.
And he was drained on some challenges, and Parvati does have value in challenges, but I mean, not so much that you should keep such a dangerous player around in your tribe. And I think because they go on such a winning streak, and because a few things weirdly break, they lose. And if they had just voted out Parvati here and kept Randy as one of their numbers, like, he wasn't going against that big alliance. And frankly, I think if you have those big numbers, I don't know if Danielle goes against you either, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this entire game is different, and maybe we're having, people can have to adjust their snide remarks that, like, Boston Rob's no good because he only won on his third try. If they had just voted out Parvati here, like this, and I think the big lesson here that we've learned a few other times is the best time to take out a big threat is as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, they treated this in a very, old school way. This is the free vote. Randy's the weakest member, and we can just get rid of him, and it costs.
And I think it's especially true in an all-star season where the biggest threat is a known quantity. Like, it's not just like, oh, like, it's dumb. It can be dumb in newer seasons where it's like, oh, this person is a big threat because they are strong, so we should get rid of them now. And it's like, that's not going to help you, But, like, where they have seen exactly how Parvati is able to play and yada yada.
Yeah, like, the way she is threatening is so incredibly dangerous to you. Like, you can't let her be around. Whereas the way she is
not useful to you.
Yeah, it's not useful. Like, Rob, I still think, like, you just don't vote him out first. You get what you can out of Rob, and you try to vote him out later. Now, obviously, the Redemption Island crew grew to regret that, but they had opportunities. But yeah, he's the one building your camp. He's the one helping you win challenges. He's useful. We might see in the future with Tony, even though he feels dangerous, like, he is a hard worker around camp. He's a strong dude. But Parvati is just dangerous, and Russell is just dangerous, which is why the next time he comes to play, people vote him out they create the first opportunity to get rid of him,
which I think might be overkill, but still.
Yeah. That's what Parvati is, and they absolutely should have gotten rid of her. But to your point, I'm glad they didn't. The season is better that they didn't. And I kind of feel like another player that might end up being like this is Sierra from Blood versus Water in Cambodia. She doesn't have a whole lot of value to any tribe she's on. No. She's, I think, good at puzzles, and
she's not
a dangerous player. Like, you can get rid of her, or you can build the threatening case early and get rid of her. And they should have gotten rid of Parvati.
Yeah. And one thing I will say, though, which is actually sort of almost in defense of keeping Parvati, but not in enough of one, but just that one of their arguments was like, oh, she knows all these people on the other side, which, for one thing, just further showing that nobody remembers Candace. They always just mention the Micronesia people. And it's like, first of all, Courtney knows James and Amanda too. Danielle knows Sari, but and then it's like, yeah, Parvati knows James, Amanda, Sari. She also knows Candace, but nobody mentions that because no one gives a shit about Candace. But while that's definitely, like, you could see that, oh, she might jump to them. It's like, or if you work with her, you know, she might be able to use that to your advantage. Like, And even though she does not work with those people, she definitely uses knowing them to her advantage later.
Yeah, and that's
Love
what
that.
Russell points out. And sure, if you're working with Parvati, then that could be a great asset. But they were not working with Parvati, and it didn't seem like they had any intention to. And I bring this up about like this is a big lost opportunity, and I'm not just framing it for Rob's sake because I'm a big Rob fan. I think he's the one that made this vote happen. I
Mhm.
kind of feel like Russell, no, sorry, Coach Jerry and Tyson wanted to vote out Parvati. Like
Coach
Sandra
very
go,
much so.
yeah, Coach very much so, and I think Jerry very much so. Like she's
Mhm.
already like hates this girl.
Jerry and Coach and Jerry were linked,
Yeah.
man.
Well, and Parvati and Jerry both have confessionals about how they can't stand one another.
Yeah,
Although Jerry, again, it's like I wish I had what she has and bottled
yeah.
it. Like she recognizes, how formidable she is, and I think it was one of those deals where it's the first vote. Nobody wants to really step out and assert their authority. Rob has never had a problem with that, and especially after he has his big fainting spell and his big hero moment, and I'm going to do this now. I don't care about other people's feelings. I had a crybaby-itis. There you go. Possibly the second worst
We're
Boston
even.
Rob impression on podcast. But yeah, I think this is him. I think this is his ego. Like, no, Randy, he's useless. I don't like Randy. He's not my kind of guy, and he blew it. And why I say I think Tyson wanted to vote her out is because later on we'll see him go to extreme measures to try and vote this person out. And that's the other thing. Like if Parvati wasn't there, Tyson doesn't do his thing. They just easily split the vote between Russell and Danielle, and everything smoothly goes on.
Yeah, and who knows if Russell would even play an idol on Danielle?
I'd say he 100% wouldn't have.
Exactly, because Danielle ain't charming.
No, I mean maybe he just does because he figures this is the play, but he also wouldn't have felt like he could because he thinks he manipulated Tyson. When we get to that episode, we can discuss that. We'll discuss it then. But yeah, I think, and that's obviously this is results based things, but the evidence was there enough that this person is dangerous to you. You should get rid of her. The danger she represents is really high. The value she represents is minimal. Whereas Randy presents no danger other than he could vote with anybody at any time. But if you have the most people, it doesn't matter. Obviously, his value is also incredibly minimal. But I'd say put Randy here. Value and danger is about there. Parvati like that. Like it should have been like a no-brainer. That they'd already seemed to have formed some kind of alliance of 6, and she was not part of it. And she knows she's not part of it. You got to get rid of her. Like that was a huge mistake.
I wonder if, they were shocked by the Stephanie vote, but I was going to say, I wonder if seeing the heroes vote for Sugar first made them think like, oh, well, if they just went with the easy one, that sort of buys us time to not play the game for a bit.
Yeah, and I do think it was part of that, and we'll discuss this throughout the next couple episodes until it becomes a non-starter. I do think a lot of the season Rob overcorrects for things that cost him in All Stars. So that's a little nugget we can go for. So I think that's all I got for this episode. These episodes. You got anything more?
Check my notes real quick. This is very, very minor, but at the end, Randy, bitter old Randy, throws his buff into the fire. I'm like, is that where they got the idea from?
Game changer!
Yeah, to bring the buffs during Redemption Island? Did that come from Randy?
He is
they were clearly pulling ideas from that season, so.
Possibly. All right, so that's
now
it.
People are going to think they missed rumors and that Randy's coming back for Game Change.
No. All right, so that's all for now. Next week, we will be discussing the next 2 episodes of Heroes versus Villains. We're not doing 3 episodes, and why we split it up that way will become clear in the future. So that's your homework. Obviously, if you want to watch ahead, you can, but then, your memory for commenting might get all jumbled. Because stick to these topics. Of course, obviously, you can always talk about the future like we already have. The last thing we wanted to talk about really quickly is in the past, what was it, last week? Was this last week? There was the news that the AV Club is no longer covering Survivor. Reason why we want to talk that is if you've been with us for a while, that is the genesis of everything we do here. We met, and by we, I mean the entire Purple Rock staff, me and John, and frankly, a lot of the people that comment on our site met because AV Club decided to start covering Survivor on their TV Club coverage, and we started commenting on it a lot. And we did it so much, we're like, hey, maybe let's do a podcast. That would be stupid. And then we did it. And then, you know, as we do more of that, we brought more people in. We talked more. That's where the fantasy game started. So that was our home. That's where we started until we decided to start doing this. And obviously, as time went on, we kind of distanced ourselves from there, not due to really anything that was going on there, more that once we got bigger, it felt like a dick move to keep telling people, oh, yeah, you should come to this website as well. We generally try not to leech traffic. Once we just looked like, oh, man, maybe we're leeching traffic, we stopped. But we always liked that place. And I just kind of wanted to get a little nod of like, this is the place that brought us all together. It is what introduced me to people I weirdly consider friends, even though, you know, you live in different parts of the country and some of you are disgustingly young. So I don't know. I just thought
we've actually met, so
it's true.
I'm young, but
I thought it was worth just kind of mentioning a bit of the end of the era, and you know, well, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I was like kind of shocked because it still had a pretty, like, I will admit I'd gone there less and less. And like on one hand, I'm like, cool. So now, because like being on the West Coast there's just so much to catch up on with like all the commenting and the tweeting and stuff like that. So it's always like reading through Twitter and then reading Matt's live blog and those comments and then reading the AV Club and those comments once we started doing the live blog. And it's like so much. But and I noticed like this year, like they still get a lot of comments, but maybe just it's all the same people, you know, which was probably kind of how it always was anyway. It's just different people. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the comment culture, although Carrie's reviews were always of quality, the comment culture had gotten a little weird there. I think probably because a lot of our good people were like me and just didn't have the time to like heavily comment on two things. I know Hornacek would just copy and paste the same big comment on each one, so everyone got to see it. But you know, yeah, like I mean, we were really thinking about it, and like some of you guys were there later. I don't know when Mark actually came in, but like I started just commenting a little sporadically at first, but in South Pacific, and like if you think about how many years ago that I was 21, like I was a baby.
Yeah, you were little Emma, and the little part was accurate.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, not inaccurate now, but and
no,
it was,
you're hella old, man. That's the second hella this 38-year-old guy said. That is far past the quotient that I'm allowed. I apologize.
As someone whose hometown is very anti-hella, it's been upsetting both times. but yeah, you know, like I mean, I remember like we were looking back at stuff and like one of my earliest comments is like a reply to John, you know? And like I remember like being like I was sort of for a while because I came in, it was like they had been covering the show for like a couple seasons. I think it started I forget when it started, but like that was around just when I joined HB Club in general. It wasn't like it was on it and then like, oh, Survivor. And you know, and I remember a few seasons later for Cara Moen, like, and then getting more into the show. It helped because that was such the nadir of the show. But then Philippines, and we were all so excited. And oh my God, Malcolm and Denise are amazing. And like,
and Cara Moen was when we started the fantasy game.
Exactly. That's and John like inviting me to the fantasy league was like because we weren't talking outside the board yet. It was like, oh, cool, like I'm one of like the people that they think of being a regular, like that's neat, you know? And so then just to look at where we're at now is just so bizarre.
Yeah, no, it was just kind of like this fun community building thing. And I think how that worked is we were people who had, and I don't mean that, and it's one of those things where I always have to preface that I'm not trying to insult other groups, and then I say things that seem insulting. I really mean it. Survivor fandom is awesome in many different forms. It's just I'm trying to show different. is that we were people who had more diverse interests. Like, frankly, for a lot of us, you, me,
Mm-hmm.
Survivor was like this dirty little secret almost, right? Like, it was a show, and it's like you and I, we've been watching it forever,
Yeah.
but it's not like, I never listed it as my favorite show, and I wouldn't really talk about it with people that I wasn't married to all that
Mm-hmm.
often. But AV Club already had a bit of a comment culture, or that I was there before TV Club was a thing. They launched TV Club, and it was a place to comment. They actually tried to do Survivor the first season and then dropped it after like 5 episodes because it really didn't match the AV Club style. In fact,
Right.
most of the every fucking one would have that. Oh, is this show still on?
And it still would get that sometimes.
Yeah,
It's just like
until we just took them
obviously,
over and we got those people out.
yeah.
But yeah, that's where I think how a different kind of group grew, is that we are people who like TV and all something, and it wasn't just Survivor obsessives, which
Mm-hmm.
other Survivor commenting had become. And for me personally, I used to comment back at Television Without Pity. That's when I really first got into Survivor as an internet commenting thing. Again, I'd been watching since the beginning, but that I got into that, I think, around All Stars, maybe Pearl Islands. But then it was gone. TV Without Pity, I think, overlapped at the beginning of TV Club, but it wasn't there. And it wasn't. There was another. I found there wasn't a place there I could discuss Survivor, and it was awesome that the AV Club just started doing it again. I can't quite remember what season. I think they came in at the end of Nicaragua to talk about how awful it was, and
I
then they
listened to,
followed
and
it up.
I know there's the finale of Heroes versus Villains actually,
Yeah.
but not the whole season, just the finale.
And I think you'll find me commenting on there. In
Yes,
fact, actually, I believe
Hercules pointed that out.
yeah. And so I think that's how like this parallel commenting group that we are so proud and excited to have started. Is just the AV Club already had a bit of a commenting culture of, be a little funny, be a little astute, don't be a dick. Although, obviously there was some of that, but there's community pressure in different places. And that was refreshing. And I think that's what drew people there. And then obviously we decided, and then by the nature of us commenting there and doing fantasy games and getting to know one another, and we invited you because we liked the way you commented, and same with Matt and other people. We got more into Survivor. Survivor became a much more fun show because of the community there. And after a while, it became clear that it's impossible to say this without some level of ego, and I don't mean it to be that, but our group, and I don't just mean us five, right. I mean the group of people that make this website what it is, and that's the commenters. That's us, and we were filled. Now, if they had thousands of comments, it was because there was 15 of us making 800 of them or something like that.
Especially for the fantasy league stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, we always felt bad about that too. It's like we're derailing conversations, and we try to keep it to a thread, but other people would come in, right? That's one of the motivations for doing stuff on our site besides the podcast. It's like, oh, let's stop, eating in other people's threads. We always were cognizant of the fact that we were guests there, but I think after a while we outgrew the AV Club's mission, which is this is one show of many, right? And especially as TV Club grew, they were like posting like 10 a night or something. Yeah. As we all became bigger Survivor fans, it made more sense for us to have Survivor place to discuss. And so it's just a weird mix of emotions when I heard that announcement, because it's like, this is why we do this, and this is how I met people that are awesome. But at the same time, it's like, I don't feel bad that the commenters move on to our site. For one, because we don't make any money off of it. And for two, it's like, it made sense. We wanted to discuss Survivor amongst these cool Survivor people. And if we have a unique culture compared to other Survivor commenting sites, it's because it grew there and it grew into something great. And I wanted to pay some homage to that era. And I'm excited that there's still some place for us all to exist. Until it becomes too much work for us, and then it's all dead.
Yeah. Well.
So that's all I had to say about that. For everybody who came from the AV Club, I'm super excited that you are with us, and hopefully we can still keep doing cool stuff.
Totally. And if you're a fan of iZombie, support Carrie's iZombie reviews instead, because she's still doing those, and that show's awesome. And that is my unnecessary plug.
And Emma will be starting up the iZombie Fantasy. No, I'm just kidding. So this would be the point where I end the show by saying hit the theme music, except that for the video portion, there's going to be no theme music. But for the podcast version, hit the theme music.